Hello and welcome to the Fridays with Alice edition of the Daily Downbeat. Today's song is a great one. With Alice, I don't really have a favorite song, but this one is one that I can listen to over and over again. It's really kind of creepy, but it's just awesome in a really cool way too. It's called The Sound of A from his 2017 studio LP Paranormal, and it's just fascinating. In fact, there's a really cool story behind it because Dennis Dunaway, the original bassist of Alice Cooper, brought the song to Alice and said, this is a really cool song. And Alice listened to it and was like, yeah, man, this is cool. And Dennis was like, Alice, you wrote this song back in 1967. And Alice had forgotten that. What's really kind of cool about it is it's got this Twilight Zone kind of vibe to it. Alice states that we were talking about the idea of doing a sci-fi thing where the sound of A, the musical note, was piped into every house and kept everybody on a kind of even keel. He went on to say that if they wanted to change your mood, they would change the tone to like an A minor or C or some augmented chord, and you were controlled by the sound. And so let's go ahead and look at some of those lyrics real quick. But before we do that, go ahead and click that subscribe button, like, comment. What's your favorite Alice song? I'd love to hear from you guys on what song it is that you love from Alice Cooper. And so let's look at those words real quick. There's not a whole lot here, but it's a lot to think about. The sound of A is in the air. The sound of A is everywhere. With the sound of a gun, and you run, yeah, yeah, yeah. The sound of A is all around. The sound of A is underground. It will creep into your bone when you're alone. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Meaningless noise is everybody's toys. The sound of A will keep you down with that cruel, peculiar sound. It will shoot into your brain and remain. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Meaningless noise is everybody's toys. Now, I don't know about you, but I want you to stop and think about the meaningless noise in our lives right now. Tweets, text messages, news alerts. It seems that our phones are constantly going off. We're constantly being fed information. Some of it's misinformation, some of it's genuine, but it's always something going on in our head more and more. It's almost as if you could hear Rod Serling just standing, smoking a cigarette, talking about all of us and looking into our lives, smoking and just saying, yet now we are living out the reality between light and shadow, the dimension of imagination, and announcing our daily walking around as who we are today and saying you're entering the Twilight Zone. I mean, stop and think about what's going on in this world. There's so much going on. But what's interesting is there's also this underlying part of us that inherently knows right from wrong, good from evil, your conscience, so to speak. We would think of that as being like the Holy Spirit from a Christian narrative and from the spiritual narrative there. But we all know, we all have this sense of what is right and wrong. We all know a common or natural law about how we should interact with one another. And that used to be the sound that kind of resonated. But with all this meaningless noise being thrown into the mix, it really kind of distorts that. And it's almost as if the noise you're hearing, if it tells you to act one way, you're going to do whatever it tells you to do instead of what you know to be right. And this goes for all different walks of humanity, all different sides of the aisle. If you feel that your way is better than somebody else's, then you kind of trample on whatever it is they believe. And that's just not very humane. And so the sound of A is in the air. And it's really kind of the sound of the world. It's kind of the sound of the hustle and bustle, dog eat dog kind of struggle, so to speak, that we are constantly fighting against. But according to Romans 12:2, we were called to be different. We rely on things like faith, hope, and love, and love being the most important of those. And so I think one of the interesting things is if you look at Matthew 10:27 or 1 Kings 19:12, you see where God's voice is equivocated to a whisper. And with all these other sounds and all this other worldly noise, sometimes that voice gets drowned out. And it's because we're not tuning our ear to him. We're tuning our ear to that. That sound of the world is intentional. It's intentionally there to keep you distracted from him and his voice. And so you have to really kind of learn how to navigate that and how to change your ear, so to speak. And so the flip side of that, like I said, we were called to be different according to Romans 12:2. But Jesus really talks about what that difference looks like. And, it's a pretty common thing we've talked about, but it's the two commandments that Christ gives us and says that the rest of the law will be fulfilled when we do these two things. So we're going to look at Matthew 22:37 through 39, which says, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments." And so Christ was pretty deliberate about those things. And, we also looked in previous posts where we talked about the fact that even means your enemies. That means all people. That means anyone you come into contact with, you are to love. And that goes against this narrative that we're talking about. That goes against the meaningless noise that is constantly telling us that you can't love somebody that you don't agree with, or that you can't walk along somebody that's different than you. All that stuff is wrong. All that stuff is wrong. This is telling us to love God and love your neighbor. It doesn't say love your neighbor of a certain ethnicity, or love your neighbor of a certain sexual orientation, or love your neighbor of a certain race. It doesn't say any of that. It says to love your neighbor. And so that's humanity. And we are a family. We are brothers and sisters in creation. So I get the whole fact that not everybody has come to Christ, but what does that matter? According to Jesus, we are to love God and love our fellow human, our fellow brother or sister in creation, in humanity. And so I would take that as a challenge. I would take that as a challenge to stop the vitriol that comes with the worldly narrative that you can't agree, you can't love, and you can't like or walk with somebody that has a different opinion than you. Because we've reached that point. We've reached that point where if we differ, if we disagree, then we're not supposed to talk and we're not supposed to love. And, that's not to say that at times saying nothing is better than saying anything, especially when there's disagreement. But it's saying that you can do that in love. Silence and respect is still a type of love. And we can walk that out as well. And so, this is a little bit of a difficult topic today, but I think Alice does a really good job of pushing the envelope without being belligerent about it. And that's what this song is to me. The sound of A is really the sound of whatever it is in your life that controls you. I think of that A being anything other than Christ. And so if we were to listen to the sound of C, the sound of Christ, what would that tell you? That would tell you to love God and love people. And I would really focus in more on that sound and walking that out than I would on all of the other distractions that we have. And it's a word for me to hear. It's a word for everyone to hear at this point, because we are in tune to our handheld devices and our emails and our, constant reminders of what we're supposed to be doing next instead of what we're doing right now. And so it's really something to think about. Stop and give that one some thought. So it's really just something to think about for the day. Choose love, and don't let those other sounds get in the way. Hopefully this Friday treats you well, and you have a great weekend coming up ahead of you. We will catch you tomorrow, but in the meantime, you keep walking in faith and rocking with Alice. We'll catch you later. Thanks.